Hello and welcome to the New Jersey Bankers and New Jersey Bank Marketing Association video podcast. This is episode 2 in our October podcast series. In this episode, we'll hear from Matthew Harvey of Financial Institutions Consulting about doing business development on a shoestring. Let's go to Jane Gore for the introduction.
So I'd like to introduce from Financial Institutions Consulting Company, Matt Harvey, and he's here with John Hogan to give him color commentary. But I'll turn my mic over. Thank you.
Thank you. As Jane said, she initiated this, inviting us to speak here based on an article that Charles had written for the Banking Strategies magazine back in August. It was attracting deposits from small business. It was basically 5 tactics for attracting deposits. And this kind of follows on to what Steve was talking about, the business development, the importance of attracting deposits, and how basically, anybody's happy to take your money, but you really want them to kind of bring it in and give it to you. As Jane mentioned, Charles is on a plane, I think on his way back from Singapore or to Hong Kong or somewhere, so he have delegated this to John and I. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of what are some of the issues, the deposit issues? Why is it so difficult to get deposits? What's going on in the market? And then the next section is really the meat, which is creating a deposit gathering machine. And this is where we talk about the 5 tactics of bringing in deposits and of really building up your momentum for this. A little bit about Financial Institutions Consulting. We're a management strategy consulting firm based out of New York and Connecticut. Our clients are, surprise, financial institutions. We work for banks, card companies, commercial finance companies. Clients range in size from $1 billion to, what are they at now, $1.5 trillion, something in that neighborhood. We've done work in probably 10, 12 different countries. And in addition, we also have a bi-monthly newsletter, which goes out to about 5,000 executives around the world. And you can feel free to sign up for that. It's through our website, www.FICINC.com, which is down there in really small letters at the bottom. But it's FICINC.com, and it's a free newsletter. And every 2 weeks, there's an article that kind of discusses issues of importance, primarily around small business, which is what our main focus is on. So what are some of the issues with deposits? Since 2004, DDA balances, those nice free deposits that we all like to get, have declined by about $40 billion. A number of reasons for that is interest rates go up, companies and individuals are more likely to put their money into higher interest earning instruments, CDs, money market accounts, and as well as improved cash management on the part of companies. I was just speaking with a woman who runs cash management at a client in the West Coast yesterday. And she was talking about some work they're doing with Intuit. She's on a steering committee. And they're developing a software that's going to work with QuickBooks that's going to sort of look back at a company's cash transactions over the past couple of years and project what their cash needs are going to be on a month-by-month basis and really allow them to manage their cash down to really nominal levels. And it's things like that that are going to have a really big impact on banks as companies, even small companies, become very sophisticated in their ability to manage their cash and what they have sitting in the bank. The other issue is obviously net interest margin. As rates are going up, margins compress. You see that going with a trend from 2003 to 2006. So that's really making those deposits that you do have much more expensive to get and less profitable to keep. The third factor is that there's really intense competition for those deposits, both from banks and from non-banks. We don't need you to tell you that really, that you've got a lot of competition from local banks, you've got big banks moving into the market, as well as these organizations, investment companies, brokerage companies, Merrill Lynch, the UBS, that are all competing for that deposit dollar. So how do you focus on this? How do you attract those deposits, keep those deposits? And it's all really around sort of focusing on building this deposit gathering machine. So three approaches, or three kind of main elements to this. First is to segment the market, figure out which of those target customer groups that you want to attract and that you're able to attract. Two is to focus your sales department, and a lot of banks are working on developing sort of deposit-only sales forces or business development officers. And third is to align your incentives. That is to make it really profitable for the banker to bring in deposits versus loans. And we'll talk about that a little later on. What are some of the implications of this is that we're in a tough deposit market now, obviously. It's not going to change. It's going to remain tough. Traditional approaches so far have failed. You can't just sit back and let the deposits roll in. Obviously, opening new branches is not bringing in deposits the way that it did even a couple of years ago. So what do? You start really with your customer base. You look at where your customers are, who they are, and start developing your segmentation approach there. So these are the five elements, or the five tactics, really, for building a deposit gathering machine. First is you need to clarify the branch manager's role. Segment your market. Simplify your product set. Emphasize product packages. And align your incentives to really highlight and focus on gathering deposits. Let's start with clarifying the branch manager's role. As you well know, branch managers today are asked to do an awful lot. One analogy that we've used is that the branch manager is kind of like a sausage. They get more and more sort of stuffed down their throats of what they need to do. Sell this product for one group, sell it for another group, manage the branch, do the staffing. There's only so much they can really do. So senior management needs to decide what it is they really want the branch manager to do, what their real priorities are, and focus on that and stay with it. Second thing is segmenting the market. Find those customer groups that are attractive, are large, growing, and that you really are able to competitively attract in your market. And this graph just is from a client that we've done. And it's kind of looking at some of the aspects of how to determine what your segment approach should be. And what's the potential growth? What experience do you have with them? A lot of banks can just look into their client base and find some segments. We had one client that went through their deposit or through their client base and found that they had an awful lot of labor unions in their book, and built a very nice business out of that. And they're a West Coast bank, but they've expanded that segment niche nationally, and there's a big deposit base in that. They should also consider segmenting the sales staff, and there's increasingly banks are focusing on this. I think one of the more well-known efforts is from Union Bank of California, but Comerica is also following this approach, where they've got a specifically deposit-focused sales staff. So these are people who go out and their only job is to bring in deposits. This is what they're paid to do. They don't do loans. And eventually they've built it so that they've got these people even managing deposit-only relationships. And most banks we've looked at in small business, only, about 40% of the small business clients actually borrow. The rest are deposit only. And what we found is that most banks basically ignore those customers. They've got, basically bankers and RMs are pretty much focused on the loan side. So they're not even really talking to these people. But they're a significant source of profit for the bank. So banks like Comerica, like Union, have developed deposit-only relationship managers whose job it is to manage these accounts, cross-sell cash management products, other fee-based products, bring in their personal accounts, and basically make sure they're not ignored. I remember speaking to a banker in the Midwest, and I'd asked them to go through a list of 5 or 10 customers and just tell me a little bit about them. And I looked at one that was generating about $120,000 a year in revenue, but had no loans. And the banker said, "Oh, that's not really a customer. They don't have a borrowing relationship. We don't need to worry about them." It's like $120,000 in revenue, and they're not a real customer. So that's just a basic attitude that sort of that loan-focused bankers have. So this is why more and more banks are focusing on on building a deposit-only sales force. Simplify the product set. More and more banks, you kind of get product proliferation. I looked at banks that have literally dozens and dozens of deposit products. Well, it makes it very difficult to sell for the branch manager, the banker, remembering all the different deposits, all the different products, and makes it very difficult for the customer to know which one is right for them. So what we've seen in the last few years is the banks are focusing on kind of slimming down that product set, making them simpler, making them easier to understand, and just kind of streamlining the whole process. Another thing that more and more banks are doing is building product packages. And these packages are basically the same products that you've got anyway, bundling them together and putting a marketing spin on them to focus them toward your target priority, your priority target customer group. In this example, SunTrust has put together this medical private banking package, and they work with the medical groups in their area, the local AMA, and in this case it's the Duval County Medical Society, and these are some newly minted physicians. They go out to them and they sell them this package, and it's basically standard banking products, ties in commercial products, personal products, to try and bring in the entire relationship. But it's it's a nice marketing touch. It's easy to sell. It enables the customer to walk away with more than just 1 or 2 products. So they walk out with not just a checking account and maybe a credit card, but an entire suite of products. This example is HSBC's legal services package. And again, it ties in the personal, it ties in the business, the partnership accounts. So it's easy to sell, and it's a good cross-sell opportunity. Aligning incentives. This is probably one area where I would say most banks that we've dealt with kind of really fall down on. They talk about deposits. They talk about the importance of deposits. We want deposits. We want our bankers to sell deposits. And you look at their incentive package, and what are they paying bankers to do? Bring in loans. Well, if they're talking about deposits and deposits are important, why are they paying, 50% more on the loans than they are on deposits? And it's been sort of a real challenge to get banks to look at this and revisit their deposit incentives, their incentive programs, and build them so that they really focus the banker on incentives. A few banks we've worked with have done kind of a really good job of this. One bank recently we worked with has put a real penalty on. They basically set a tier. You've got to bring in X dollars of deposits as a branch manager, for example. And if you fall below that tier, your 100% level, you're really dinged significantly. And if you go above that, you get a real significant upside. And deposits in that case come out to be much more important than lending. But that bank is, I would say, the odd man out in terms of where banks are today with their incentive programs. The other thing that you need to think about when you're building an incentive program is tying all the pieces together. So tying in the branch manager, their incentives, the small business banker, the call center, putting their incentives together so they're all working in the same way. There's some issues for consideration. How much is a relationship worth? And we were talking to a bank in the Midwest, and we were sort of saying, oh, we have a really strong relationship with our clients. They love us. You know, they really want to bank with us. And it's like, well, how much is that worth? You know, if you're going to put a dollar amount on it, how much extra can you charge for that relationship? And his answer was, very bluntly, about 25 basis points. So that's the price of a relationship these days. Should you assign a deposit-only sales staff? Does that work within the context, within the culture of your bank? How do you do that? How do you put that together? Can you use the internet for deposit growth? A number of banks today are building internet-only banks, City Direct, following the ING model. Is that something that you can do in your bank? Is that something that would work? And the last issue to think about is what role can credit play in building deposits? Basically, companies, even if a business isn't going to borrow, they want to know that they can if they want to. And that's kind of one of the reasons they go to a bank. So, you know, it's nice to emphasize deposits. You really need to emphasize deposits, but they also need to know that if they have to, they can borrow. So that's one of the other factors that you need to build into your model in bringing in deposits.
We hope you enjoyed this New Jersey Bankers and NJ Bank Marketing Association podcast program. If you have comments or suggestions, please email steve@professionalpodcasts.com. We post-produce these programs in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Thanks for being with us, and take good care.